Rachel V. Hill, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of Joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
Hey, it's Jake Shapiro, and welcome into Coffee Break. Obviously, not Rachel V. Hill. Hey, it's Jake Oh, wait, no, this is Groundhog Day. I'm sorry. I'm here with Aniello Piro from Mile High Sports, one of my really good buddies in the Denver media. And Aniello, really great time in sports, kind of low-key time. We've got the Super Bowl coming up. We've got basketball. We've got all these all-star games coming up. And I really like to look back during all-star games and reflect because it's a moment in history. It's, this player has accomplished this. How can we stack them up against prior players? Last night, we got the final nail in the coffin. Jamal Murray is not an all-star this year. We kind of suspected it was coming. But Nikola Jokic is going to be the only person from the Denver Nuggets headed to Indiana, which is pretty upsetting if you ask me, because they just won the championship.
It's really interesting that you have two MVP seasons and an NBA Finals championship season and no running mate to kind of go along with it, right? And obviously we know what's the terminology that a lot of people use with Jamal. He's a big game riser, right? He gets up for the big game, shows up when it matters most. And so Jamal Murray has all-star characteristics, all-star qualities, but he plays a jam-packed, position, especially in the Western Conference. But who would have thought that you'd have an NBA championship and two MVP seasons and no official all-star running mate to go along with it?
Yeah, and not only that, you don't even have Payton Watson in the game, the Rising Stars game. You don't have, that we know of so far, a KCP in the three-point contest or an Aaron Gordon back in the dunk contest. The coaching staff actually can't go back to Indiana because they coached last year the All-Star game, and the same coaching staff can't coach the All-Star game twice in a row. So literally Jokic and I guess Colin Gillespie's in the G League next up game, which isn't the NBA level. So literally Jokic is the only championship representative sending to Indiana when you have a team like the Lakers who are under 500 sending LeBron, AD, and I'm sure some rising stars or something like that. So it just is disappointing. It comes back to do the Nuggets actually exist, which has been my joke for a couple of years. But you got to think the NBA is kind of overlooking, or at least not pumping up the Nuggets enough with just sending some sort of representation to the game, right?
Yeah, it's strange. And what this is, it feels like the winning version of Nug Life, right? Because Nug Life is associated with them struggling and blowing leads or whatever it might be. And it's you are the best team in the league. You have the best player in the league, and yet you still can't get that extra attention or just be treated, frankly, like a championship caliber team. And, there is a lot of attention. We're getting more Jokic talk and whatnot, but it is just, I can't think of another scenario, right, where you have someone who's this good in a team this dominant with this much success and not a tried and true number two that people are recognizing on a similar level as that one player. So it's interesting, but I think, Nuggets fans understand. And I think, Jamal actually spoke about this during his media day remarks when he was asked about making an all-star team. There's a lot of all-star caliber players, all-star players that have made those teams but not won NBA championships. And I think everyone would trade an NBA championship for making an all-star team.
No doubt. The question for Jamal Murray now is, would he trade an NBA championship for an all-NBA team? Because that's going to mean about $80 million for him, which is a question that's going to be asked probably in the next year and a half because there's some time left on his contract before he earns the extension. With Jamal specifically, probably didn't deserve to be an all-star this year because of the 15 games he missed or so, about 10, 15 games. There were better cases to be made for De'Aaron Fox and James Harden, who are both not even all-stars. The only one that was kind of iffy was Paul George, but really it's hard to make the case that there was a second all-star this year. Maybe last year with Aaron Gordon for sure. But it really got me thinking, AP, because I've had this in my mind for a couple of years where it's well, Nikola Jokic, obviously he's had a co-star in the playoffs in the Blue Arrow. He has been fantastic in the playoffs. You can barely ask for a better player. But what if you did ask for a better player? Who would be the best player that you could pair with Nikola Jokic in NBA history? You could go back, you could pick any player. And I have a couple different answers based off of what we've seen with the Nuggets and their title runs and what works best next to Jokic. I have some ideas off of what might work with Jokic, but to give him that true co-star, what's the name that pops to your head?
And I don't know if there's an obvious answer to this question, to be honest with you. And let's get this one out of the way. It's hard for it not to be Jamal Murray just because we've seen the success, right? The Jokic-Jamal Murray tandem has taken them to places that, frankly, they've never gone to before. Their only championship in franchise history. But how does the play style kind of mesh with Jokic? I mean, there's so many great players that have spent some time, in this city, whether it was at the beginning of their career or latter portion of their career that I think mesh really well. And initially, I just go to a guard, right? Because you've got Jokic who's going to handle things down low, and it is positionless basketball these days, but he is going to get those rebounds. You want someone that can play at the top. And the first name, the big one that comes to mind with that traditional type of point guard is Chauncey Billups, right? A prime Chauncey Billups, somebody that was able to play with different styles of players, specifically when he was in Detroit. I think that's an interesting name to keep an eye on. If you want someone to kind of stretch the floor and play off the Jokic passing dynamic, I mean, you got the Skywalker. That's a big option. And really what I'm curious to see, and I know he's not an all-star right now and he's a young player, nor did he make the Rising Stars team, Payton Watson's skill set is perfect for playing alongside Nikola Jokic. So I don't know if there's a tried and true answer, but I feel like it would have to be a guard that can complement the big man down in the paint.
Well, let me just give you a couple names, because off of the Jamal Murray model, let's say, well, what's a better version of Jamal Murray, similar play style?
Right. Which is what I was trying to figure out.
Dwayne Wade, I think, would be an amazing answer for playing next to Jokic. Tracy McGrady, I think, also a similar play style. Not as good as Dwayne Wade because he's a little bit more ball dominant. I think both players were fantastic. I just mean in terms of pairing with Nikola Jokic. And then I really go to, like, does Steve Nash work because he's a small guard, maybe too small? You don't have the defensive aspects. You do have someone who's a little bit more ball dominant. So then you start thinking about, well, non-ball dominant defensive players that are really good, because you think about maybe the Aaron Gordon model, the guy who's an amazing defensive player who can cover up for some of Jokic's, maybe some of the not better aspects of his game on the defensive end. Name that comes to my mind, Rasheed Wallace.
Ooh.
I think Rasheed Wallace would be the best person to pair with Nikola Jokic in NBA history. Can stretch the floor, ferocious dunker, perennial depoy candidate, and a guy who, personality-wise, just wanted to play a role in the NBA. Didn't care about being a star. And I think it doesn't matter that part necessarily with Jokic, because he's long said, this is Jamal Murray's team. I don't care about being the star. But I do think in terms of fitting with, I know it's really funny, but he has said that over and over.
He has.
But I do think in terms of, like, fitting in, you want a guy like everyone on the Nuggets right now who just wants to fit in.
Yeah. And that's where, like, the answer just, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there, is like, what type of play style are you going to get from Jokic, right? And I think that kind of influences the answer. And I've said this on social media time and time again. He's like he's the avatar, right? Like, if you've ever watched the animated series, like, you need him to pass, he could do that. You need him to score, he could do that. You need him to rebound, he could do that, and do it all together and make everybody around him better. So there's a variety of different options. And we almost got Dwayne Wade. Remember, they sat down, free agent meeting. He even put out a little sympathy tweet after the fact that he didn't sign here. You almost got that Jokic Dwayne Wade dynamic. I like Dwayne Wade a lot, though. That would have been a great play style.
Yeah, Dwayne Wade, I'll never forget Nuggets Twitter being excited. We just got a meeting with Dwayne Wade. Yeah. We've come so far from there. And on your point, Payton Watson, I think is a really great fit, especially if he learns to shoot just a little bit better. His shooting stroke is starting to look really good. I'm just talking about consistently and maybe in contested situation. And then you're starting to talk about above the break, because he's mostly a corner guy. I think Payton Watson's going to be a very great player in the NBA, somewhere akin to what Aaron Gordon does, but more leaner athleticism than Aaron, instead of a strength athleticism, and something maybe to where Kawhi Leonard is. I think Payton Watson has the ability to have a play style somewhere between Aaron Gordon and Kawhi Leonard. And that, again, is another guy I thought, hey, Kawhi Leonard, current player that would play amazing with Jokic. Giannis Antetokounmpo, amazing player for current Jokic. Steph Curry, because of off-ball movement, would be an incredible pairing with Jokic. I just think there's so many guys that would play well with Jokic in doing this experiment because of his amazing ability to adapt his play style on any given night. The things that are, again, necessary are defense and athleticism and the ability to shoot. And I think the personality thing is huge. Our producer Joey was saying, Michael Jordan. I don't think Michael Jordan would be, even though he has a similar play style to Jamal Murray and Dwayne Wade, he's kind of that hyper version of that combo guard who can score. I don't think Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant would be the preferred teammates of Nikola Jokic. I think, again, you're looking at Dwayne Wade would probably be a better option in terms of historical pairings.
And somebody that can get their own bucket, but also comfortable playing alongside. Like, they don't need the ball in their hand at all times. Like Jordan, that hyper alpha, give me the ball. Kobe Bryant, give me the ball, right? Like, there's certain players that, like, the offenses and the team needs to run through them. And, like, not to bring it back fully to Payton Watson, but, like, the name keeps coming up as Kevin Durant as well. Because if you're able to get somebody that is lengthy like that, because why people are so excited about Payton Watson, if he can improve his shot as well, is someone that thrives off Jokic's passing game, can get his own board, but someone that can also create their own shot. Because it's one thing for an opposing team to have to, try to clog up the lanes or play a certain type of way. But if you have someone that can complement Jokic in that way while also getting theirs on their own when it calls for it, that's the double-edged sword.
And I think people misremember with Durant, especially with the Warriors. Durant was one of the best centers in basketball with the Warriors in his limited minutes at the center position. He was not an all NBA defensive player type player at center, but he was certainly capable and above average at defending big. So again, I think Payton Watson gives you many options. I don't know that he's going to be big and strong enough to play center, backup center like Aaron Gordon. I do think that him developing his mid-range game, which has happened here all of a sudden, is going to give the Nuggets a really good option because he's starting to hit these kind of Kawhi Leonard, Jimmy Butler-esque shots fading across the mid-range. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope does this a bunch, but he does this on set plays. Payton Watson is doing this in plays that break down, and that's showing some ability to create your own shot. I'm not saying Payton Watson's going to be an all-star. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but he is showing some characteristics of a early on player that develops into being an all-star. And if you look at some of the rate statistics in the per 75, per 100 possession statistics, Payton Watson at this point in his career is very similar to where Jimmy Butler and Kawhi Leonard were year two in their careers. So, and again, Kawhi Leonard was a star at San Diego State. Jimmy Butler was a star at Marquette. Payton Watson is so early on in his development.
Yeah, he's a young, raw player. I mean, they're still very much molding, his NBA style of play. And I think the answer to the initial question, Jake, it really also depends on like where we're at, right? Because you bring up Kevin Durant, backup center, right? That was what, 2016, 17, 18-ish, right? That's when it was no centers, right? Everyone wanted to be small. Everybody wanted to shoot, play fast, and score. And over the last, 3 or 4 years with Giannis, Embiid, and Jokic, you're seeing a lot of emphasis now on teams need to have a strong backup center.
Right. Jokic changed the game.
Right.
Jokic made the center important again.
And so I do think it depends on which era of Nikola Jokic are we talking about here, because the modern era, as in 2024 right now, I think there's a different answer than if you're pairing him with 2019 version of Nikola Jokic.
Right. 2019, I might say Steph Curry. Right now, I'd more be akin to say a guy like Rasheed Wallace, which again is probably the best version of an Aaron Gordon that you could possibly get. But, looking at all these different names and players, we've got the trade deadline coming up 6 days from today. What do you want to see the Denver Nuggets do, if at all anything? Their options are very limited because of where they're at, both salary cap wise and because of prior trades they've made.
Yeah, and that's where it's hard, because I don't think you're going to be able to go out and get like a real impact player. You still kind of got the Reggie Jackson trade from last year kind of paying dividends here now into this year. I know he wasn't all that good for them down the stretch after the trade. So I think that they're pretty hamstrung. And frankly, I'm excited to see what Julian Strawther does when he comes back. He's been out for, I don't know off the top of my head,
14 games, I think.
Yeah, it's been a good chunk of games here. And not saying that I don't want them to make a move. It's just obviously they're hamstrung here. But I was talking about this with some of the fellas the other day, and it was the Milwaukee game. Sometimes they look a little lopsided. They look a little lackadaisical, but this starting five, even losing Bruce Brown and losing some of these players, when they turn that switch, they're just as good as they were last year. And I'm not saying they don't need to make a move or anything like that. You're looking for a depth piece, right? But at the end of the day, this Nuggets starting five, so long as they're healthy, I'm still confident in their ability to beat anybody on any given night, any given place. Yeah. That's just who they are. And so I think you want to bank on the youth. You want to bank on Payton Watson getting better and improving. You want to see Julian Strawther get back on the court. Christian Brown, he was integral to their championship run last season. He's turned it on over the last couple of games as well. So I think they have a lot of those pieces already in place. I don't think you need to force a hand one way or the other to make a big trade, nor really can they.
I worry with Julian and his ability to get back into the rotation. We saw late last year, Zeke Naji and Vlatko Čančar, who were in the rotation, had injuries around the same time as now with Julian, and they really struggled to get back into the rotation. My number one worry with the Nuggets trade at the deadline is Reggie Jackson came as a post-deadline acquisition last year, picked up, but Reggie has admitted time and time again, he struggled to kind of find his vibe, find the rhythm with the Nuggets because they play such a different style than the rest of the NBA. So you're talking about a player that you need to be able to plug and play, not a player who's going to be a guard, probably. You're not going to get a Reggie Jackson replacement because they're not going to learn the Nuggets system. You need someone who's going to be a periphery role player or maybe a backup center. And you mentioned the Milwaukee game. I can mention the Boston game. Aaron Gordon is the Nuggets backup center when they need him to be, and he's awesome at it. Look at what they did in Oklahoma City the other night. They couldn't pull out the win, but for 40 minutes of that game, they were fantastic with Aaron Gordon playing center, and Aaron Gordon looked like an all-star in that game. So I'm not worried about a backup center per se. What I am worried about is what happens if Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic get into foul trouble, because then you do have to play DJ. You do have to play Zeke. We saw DJ play a couple minutes in the finals last year, had a couple really big plays, had a big block in the Sun series, and also played a couple minutes in the Minnesota series because they had two bigs. Zeke didn't play at all in the playoffs practically. So that's my worry. Do the Nuggets need to pick up like just a body to play center? Is that going to be valuable to them? I don't think a guard is the right answer. I think you have to ride it out with Reggie Jackson. And then I think you have to hope with Christian Braun, okay, you've asked him to do all these different things in the regular season. You've asked him to be a playmaker. You've asked him to be creating his own shots. That hasn't panned out yet. Can he go back to being a 3-and-D guy and find his role? So again, I think it's pretty obvious what the Nuggets need to do. And it's either pick up a backup center or nothing at all.
Correct. And it's like splitting hairs a little bit, because to the point that we were just discussing, like you've seen this team step up in clutch situations. They didn't win against Oklahoma City, but that was a gutsy performance for 3 quarters. They are showing you what they can do. And at the end of the day, like, it's no shade against any of the other teams. Like, they've got the experience. They've got a good mix of youth and experience to go along with that. And look, Oklahoma City hasn't been there and done that. Minnesota, they don't even get along with each other on that team. The Clippers, okay, like, they're surging right now, but the Nuggets have their number historically. So who's the team in the Western Conference that you're like, we have to make this move to counter that or counter this? They just beat Boston. They're a young team that's yet to prove they can play their best when it matters most in the clutch. Milwaukee, they beat at home, rally coming from behind. They are in good shape with what they have right now.
So who in the West does concern you then?
I guess Minnesota off the top, just because of the style of play. Like, I think Anthony Edwards can take a game over. I think Anthony Edwards is going to be a problem, but Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert at the end of the day, like, not that they're going to cancel each other out, but in a 7-game series, and they gave the Nuggets their toughest series of the playoffs last year. What has changed from that dynamic from last year to this coming season? They've gotten better.
Jalen McDaniels.
Exactly. But is Jalen McDaniels going to be the end-all, be-all to take this Nuggets team down, you think?
Well, no, he's not going to take the Nuggets team down, but it does completely change the dynamic of that series because he's a defensive player of the year candidate.
Right.
He's a fantastic defender, and Jamal Murray's historically struggled against him. I can give you, not just across the West, I can give you the 5 most concerning teams for the Denver Nuggets this postseason.
Mm-hmm.
Boston Celtics, Philadelphia 76ers, because of the way they've matched up against the Nuggets.
Without Embiid, if he's out for the foreseeable?
No, without Embiid, they don't stand a chance. With Embiid, it's going to be tough. The Los Angeles Clippers,
mm-hmm.
the Phoenix Suns have started to figure it out, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think the Oklahoma City Thunder, in the right circumstance against the Nuggets, could wipe the floor with them in a series because they could just out-athlete them and run it up down the floor. I would say the Nuggets are likely to win that series in 6, but I could see a scenario in which a young team just runs up and down the court with the Nuggets, and the Nuggets look tired, and the Nuggets have played a lot of games in the last couple of years, and it looks bad. The Los Angeles Clippers, to me, look like the best team in basketball right now. That's why they're there. James Harden has completely figured it out. They have 3 different bigs that are playable between Daniel Tice, Mason Plumlee, and Ivica Zubac. They all can play. They all can follow Nikola Jokic. They can all bother the Nuggets, or the Clippers can go small, which historically has not worked against the Nuggets, but they have the option to do that at other points in the postseason. Minnesota doesn't scare me at all. Watch what happens in the second half of their season. They're going to fall apart. Like their schedule's tough. They haven't had the adversity. They're going to have some adversity. It's not going to go well. The Phoenix Suns have started to figure it out with Bradley Beal. I don't think they have what it takes to take down the Denver Nuggets because they're not deep enough. Again, they don't have another good backup center like they did last year. Jock Landale even bothered the Nuggets a little bit, but I just don't think they have enough. But again, I think that's one of the 5 best teams in basketball right now. The Boston Celtics, it's obvious the reasons why. And again, the Sixers have the ability to do a lot of different things, and they actually have a good coach now, unlike before. So those are the teams that concern me. And what I want to point out here, Aniello, is last year I was strident. I was confident. I didn't say anyone could beat the Nuggets. This year, I think there are teams that could actually beat the Nuggets. And it was pointed out by Ryan Blackburn, our guy. The Nuggets' effective field goal percentage has dropped this year. Their offense just isn't as efficient. But again, they've shown sign and sign again that they can turn it on in the clutch.
And that's what I rest my head on at night is not that I don't put stock into the regular season. Obviously, I do. And I think, the teams that you mentioned, whether it's Boston or Minnesota or Phoenix or whatever, that's starting to put it together. Like the Nuggets aren't quite as good maybe or well-rounded, I think is the better way to put it, as they were last year. But I still look at the clutch numbers and the clutch metrics, and I just think any given game, when this team is locked in like we know they can, I think they could beat anybody. And I do agree with you. Like last year, I was feeling a lot more confident than I, maybe was this year. But I don't think there's a team out there that is a clear, like we were talking about with the trade deadline, like you got to make this move to counter that, right? I think the Nuggets, with how they're built right now, are still an upper echelon team well on the fast track.
Oklahoma City needs to make a trade to counter the Nuggets.
Correct.
They need to pick up another. Right. It's the other teams having to catch up to the Nuggets. And that's what the Suns did. That's why they picked up Nurkic. That the Lakers got bigger because of what happened in that Nuggets-Lakers series last year. So yeah, I agree with you. It's the other teams having to catch up with the Nuggets, not the other way around. I just don't think this Nuggets team is quite at the level of last year's. But again, we saw last year, they showed an innate ability to flip the switch. Some people don't believe in the switch. This team showed.
I do.
I do too.
I sure
this team
do.
showed that they can. They have a switch and they know when and how to flip it. And the only time they lost in a serious way in the playoffs last year was when a team had an unbelievable 3-point shooting night. Miami game 2 of the finals. Phoenix in that series as well. Or a guy went for 50. Phoenix and right. Anthony Edwards.
They got to be. You got to have these otherworldly performances to beat this team. I just think when they're at their best, they could beat anybody, right? And it's going to be interesting because you bring up Oklahoma City, and I like these teams a lot. And I'm sorry, like the analytical people, Ryan Blackburn, probably not going to like this. Like there's that switch, there's that energy that certain teams, certain players just know what they're doing and really, for lack of a better phrase, are calm in those moments. And we haven't seen Oklahoma City do that. Boston is fantastic during the regular season. They went to 7 games last year in the playoffs against Atlanta. There's maturity in learning how to win that I think Denver has over a majority of these other teams right now. I think Milwaukee's going to be interesting. I think the Clippers, Kawhi's been there and done that, but can they do it collectively? But when it comes to knowing how to win with what you got and playing for each other, Denver's the best team out there with that.
He's Aniello Piro. I'm Jake Shapiro. Where can they find your work?
I am at Media by AP on the good old social spheres.
All right, 6 more weeks of winter or 6 weeks sooner to spring. I don't know what happened there, but
hey, it feels like a spring day today. So
I know. I'm hoping it doesn't snow too much over the weekend. Anyway, when the Denver Nuggets are at their best, they're a championship level team. When coffee breaks at its best, it's with Rachel V. Hill. Sorry about me today. Anyway, we'll talk to you soon.